And there are days where I don't want to put on makeup and sit and go to interviews. There are days where it's too much pressure to have to do meetings or deal with teams. There are days where I'm just too tired to do anything, and I have to put on the face and do all of that. And I remember thinking, I was like one, you have like diminished my entire life's work into this ridiculous question, and you think it's really funny, and you are someone who's supposed to be so educated, and thousands of people are in this audience laughing. And I remember thinking, like, what hope is there for the next generation of people who we call less evolved if the head of media companies are asking these questions?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Mrs. Malini Agarwal. Malini Agarwal, aka Miss Malini, is an Indian digital influencer, TV host, entrepreneur, and she's also a best selling author. Malini ji founded her blog Miss Malini in 2008, and today it's a leading media network that creates high value multi platform content geared towards India's internet generation. Ms. Malini has a social media reach of over 6 million direct followers, and she's one of the leading female voices on the internet. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us, Malini ji. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here, Malini ji. And to kick things off with our conversation, we'd actually like to rewind a bit and take it back sort of to the start of your journey. So, from what we understand, with a father in foreign services, you've spent, I think, the first 17 years or so of your life growing up in like different places all across the globe. And I guess what I was curious about is how has that impacted you and your perspective on things? Because one thing that I've heard is that children who are like army kids or children who are foreign service kids, they have the pro of learning to adapt and assimilate to new situations really quickly. But then on the other hand, they also have this perspective where they're able to look at things from like an outside perspective almost. So just curious how you think these early experiences shaped your voice as a creator.
Great question. Honestly, I think it's the single most impactful thing that's happened in my life. And I always tell my friends who have kids saying, oh, we don't know if we should move somewhere, the kids will have to change school. It's the best. Kids are very malleable, very adaptable. And, I always say, like, you know, the world is the best classroom and travel is the best teacher, because you learn so much. And, as a kid, my best friend was from Korea, and I had so many interesting experiences. And even now, if I look back, a lot of what I ended up doing probably subconsciously was shaped by the fact that when I lived in these countries, like back in the 90s and 80s, there weren't that many Indian kids in my international class. And so a lot of people would ask me, like, did you go to school on an elephant? And I was like, that would be amazing. Can you imagine? Like, oh yeah, I have my elephants in the back. But I realized that their perspective was very based on like National Geographic or Slumdog Millionaire. So I think part of me also wanted to come back and create a voice and a blog that spoke to the international audiences as well. It definitely shaped me a lot. And like you said, you learn how to make new friends very quickly. I love the fact that you can reinvent yourself. I used to love moving to a new house, running to all the rooms and deciding this will be my room. And that was my favorite thing to do. The only thing that I think I ever feel I missed out on is that when people would say they have friends from kindergarten, I never had that. So all my friends I knew for 3 years at a time. So I became very good at making new friends very quickly. But I only now, after living in Bombay for 20 years, can say I've known someone for 20 years. Those are all the friends I made as an adult. So I don't think I say that my best years of my life were school and college. I think my best years of my life have been since I moved to Bombay.
That's a wealth of experience, and I do kind of relate to that idea of like, because you've traveled around so much, you don't really feel like completely tethered to one place until like you settle down in Bombay. And I think this idea of like looking at things from the outside, I think I'd almost say your perspective when it comes to entertainment journalism is sort of from the outside, because you'd never hear a TMZ talking about, I think, like kindness or empathy or creating a space. So I think the way it shaped your perspective is very much in the unique voice you bring to what you do.
It's so funny because it's so hard for me to explain where I'm from. When people ask me where I'm from, I say, well, I was born in Allahabad. And like they said in Bombay talkies, Allahabad ka pan wala bhi intellectual hota hai. But I'm not technically only from here. I grew up all over the world in American and international schools. And for some reason, if you go to an American or international school, you end up with an American accent. I have no idea why, but it just is the way. All the teachers are like
Yeah.
that. And I struggle with that because my accent also changes depending on who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
But people used to make a lot of fun of that. Even today, people will say, "Oh,
Mm.
why do you have an accent?" Until they understand that that's
Yeah.
how you speak.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the big thing has been that I feel that even though academically the Indian system is stronger, and I know this because when I went to Ivory Coast from having studied in modern Barakamba for 3 years,
Mm.
they let me skip the entire 8th grade because
Oh,
my
wow.
education in the Indian system was so much higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about having a personal opinion, expressing your own thoughts, not having to learn everything by rote.
Yeah.
And I think that was really cool. And that's where I feel that really helps you have that confidence, because all of us, and myself included, so many successful people still have that imposter syndrome. And
Yeah.
we all suffer from it, and I always tell people who feel like, oh, but I don't really know if I belong here, or I deserve this success. This kind of education helps you have a lot more confidence in these things,
Mm.
or at least fake it till you make it. So I think that's really been a big part of it.
Definitely, I think the kind of global exposure that you got helped you understand how important it is for everyone to voice their opinion, and that eventually led to you starting your blog. When you started out, why do you think your blog stood out from millions of other web pages and saw the kind of success that it did?
It's so funny. When I was doing this in 2008, there was no such word as content creator or influencer. And that word influencer has become a bad word now. Now it's just content. Um, and I think now the millions of people that are part of this industry of influencers or content creators, that's the same thing that we did in 2008. That there was a personal voice, there was some kind of relatability. And I think it's because when you look at mostly entertainment coverage, it'll be in a magazine, it'll be in a newspaper, and there's nobody taking onus or responsibility. They're saying, here are 15 pictures of Aishwarya Rai outside an event, enjoy. And you don't know what happens inside. It's not very real or relatable. And for me, because I had been working in radio and I'd started doing this column called Malini's Mumbai, I was invited to these page 3 events, and I blogged about it the way that I experienced it. And I think that became relatable. It became a real voice. And this is something I learned from 9 years on the radio, is that, even though you might be broadcasting to millions of people, you don't need to do that, hello, Mumbai, because everybody's having a very individual experience when they listen. If you think about it, 6 people in a car, they'll listen to a voice. It's theater of the mind, right? You will all picture that person differently, which is why we all think our favorite RJs are really good looking, because that picture, that whole joke about face radio, but people do think, and they fall in love with that voice. And it's because, and I learned this at the radio station, one of my programming directors said, don't broadcast to lots of people. Imagine your best friend is sitting across from you and tell them whatever you're saying in a slightly more enthusiastic way. Now, I'm very enthusiastic, so that's not an issue. And I started doing that, and I tried to take that same ethos to my blog. So instead of writing articles or press coverage, I was writing letters to you. And I wrote like I speak. So the language was such. It was just the way that I speak. And I think that resonated with people. And I was shocked. I was as shocked as anyone else, because I remember when I stopped doing radio, I was super depressed. I thought, I'm never going to have a job that I love as much as the radio. I always say radio was my first love and blogging my marriage. And I thought, this is it. Like, I've peaked. This is the best thing that happened to me. And then after a while, when I was only doing the blog, I'd gone to this bar called Ghetto in Bombay. And somebody asked me, what do you do? And I was like, well, I'm a blogger. And like, what's it called? And I said, Miss Malini. And they're like, oh, I read it. And I had that same feeling that I had about the radio when people would say, what do you do? And I'd say, I'm an RJ. Because it started to develop that relationship where you're like, I don't know this person, but I know this person. So it's all about having that voice. And I think that's what resonated. Also, I made that little animated character of myself. One, because she's going to age a lot better than I will. And two, I just love the idea because, everywhere in the world, you have Archie comics, you have all these characters. But in India, you have Chota Bheem and Amitabh Bachchan. There's nothing in between. And you're like, why isn't there that, the friends, that life where people don't realize that as much as you have poverty and villages and all of that is there and relevant. But
Mm.
there is a modern India that exists that can't be ignored. There's millions of people, like 75% of our population is under the age of 35.
Yeah.
They're not living in villages necessarily. A lot of them, if you look, they're living, or even if they're living in small towns, they have, if you just look at what's on TikTok, they have great aspirations. They're quite modern in that sense, and
Yeah.
and that's not represented. So I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
forgot what question I was answering, but go ahead.
No, not at all, Malini ji. And I think as we're speaking, it just reminds me how you've been through so much of a journey, because you began as like a professional backup dancer for Sukhbir. You were at MTV India, you were at Radio 1, you were at Channel V, you had your blog, and now you're essentially the mastermind, if I may use that word, behind one of India's leading like multi-platform media networks. And like what I've realized, when you hear these stories in retrospect, the dots all connect so beautifully, right? But when you're actually living through it, it isn't that neat and tidy, and there's all sorts of ups and downs. So I'm just curious if you could take us through some of the initial struggles you may have gone through in this entire journey, just so people get the perspective of how, although things seem great in retrospect, the journey of living it isn't all sunshine and rainbows, essentially.
It was like little things where, when I first moved here, I didn't know how expensive Bombay is. I came with 40,000 rupees, which don't last very long.
Yeah.
And I had to live in this silly house with 6 girls and this stupid pigeon. And
Yeah.
it would literally fly around, and I thought it would hit the fan, and there'd be pigeon blood everywhere. And it's like a fun story to tell then. It was very traumatic at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember I didn't have enough money for all my meals, because I'm not very good at planning stuff. So my salary was like, I think 18,000 rupees.
Yeah.
Rent was probably pretty high.
Yeah.
And then I could either do like a nice like pasta lunch, or find like a dhaba lunch and dinner. And I was not prepared for this, and I wasn't planning well. So luckily I made good friends, and I used to spend all my dinners at a friend's house.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky that I had very, generous friends in that way.
Yeah.
And you think about it, and you feel that, this whole concept of overnight success,
Yeah.
it took me 10 years. It was not an overnight success by any stretch of the imagination. But people see it, and suddenly they see you, and suddenly they think that, oh, it was, tell us how you did it. I'm like, it took a long time. If I start to tell you how long it took and everything it took. But I can say the one thing I'm happy about, and part of the reason I wrote the book, is that, people always say that you have to have a lot of money to make it in entertainment. You need a godfather, you need connections, you need to make compromises. And I'm living proof that that's not true. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. And that's what I really want young women to take away from my book or my journey, is that if you have passion and you want to work hard and you're excited about what you do, the world is your oyster. We live in a time where you can make anything your career, from fashion designer to social media manager to anything. It's just that the mistake people make is they say, and I used to make this mistake, and then my husband actually corrected me, is that you if you are passionate about something, you love it all the time. That then people think that, oh, if I don't love it today, that means that's not my passion. Passion is something that you want to pursue even on the days you don't love it. And there are days where I don't want to put on makeup and sit and go to interviews. There are days where it's too much pressure to have to do meetings or deal with teams. There are days where I'm just too tired to do anything, and I have to put on the face and do all of that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's something that I feel like I'm living the dream. I'm really, really happy with what has happened to my life. But I think that looking back, like you said, you can connect all the dots and it all makes sense. Everything taught me something. Dancing taught me teamwork, because you can be the best dancer, but if you're not in sync, it doesn't work. Radio taught me everything I was talking about, but also was how I actually started my relationship with Bollywood. I literally started over a tweet, and then had Imran Khan come and host my show with me. So it all makes sense now. But the one thing I can tell you very clearly, the reason for the success of it is that I didn't start the blog, to make money. Biggest mistake I think influencers and creators make now and it's not necessarily their fault, there's so much pressure, is that become a creator, become an influencer, get rich fast. I just
Mm.
watched this amazing movie called Fake Famous,
Mm.
and it's incredible. It just talks about this. It's this whole landscape and currency and industry that
Yeah.
has become about buying followers and likes and anything to, become that
Mm.
creator. I
Yeah.
didn't have that pressure. I wasn't worried about my likes and followers. And so in a sense it was easier, but nobody else was doing it, so people didn't think it was a job. So it was
Mm.
like,
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's been a lot of passion. There's been a lot of struggle. And I was reading this interview of yours where probably you had to wait around 7, 8 hours to get an interview with Shah Rukh Khan. And and today you're interviewing everyone in Bollywood, but that's how you started, and that's very inspiring for all of us. Coming to our next question, we know that the Miss Malini website has evolved over the years and covers a range of topics now. But when you started with your gossip column initially, did you face any kind of unjustified snobbery or stigma around entertainment journalism? I think some people don't give it the kind of respect that it deserves.
I think the flack I got was, why do you only write nice things? Why do you suck up to Bollywood? And I'm like, I have
Mm.
actually no agenda. I just feel that it's kind of hypocritical of us to love Bollywood,
Mm.
love the films, and then tear down the people
Yeah.
who make them or are in them so viciously, so viciously. And fine, a little gossip here and again is fine. But I realized this again, not immediately. I'm no saint. I remember we used to write gossipy pieces. When you don't know someone, you don't care how they feel.
Yeah.
And I remember we had written, and I'd written some stuff. And actually, one of the girls who wrote for me had written something about way back about how Ranveer Singh should not rap, he should stick to acting. This is when he had started his career.
Yeah.
And I randomly had run into him at Fashion Week and I was like, Ranveer, I'm such a big fan. And he was like, I'm really mad at you, Miss Malini. And I was like, why? He said, because you wrote this article. And then I was defending myself, saying, oh, I didn't do it. It was my. And then years later, he's done Gully Boy. But
Yeah.
I remember thinking, I don't like going to parties like this, that I hope they don't make contact with
Mm.
me because they'll be upset. Because what am I doing? I'm using, and I think of myself as a good person, but I'm using this internet shield to behave in a way I never would in real life. This greed for likes and followers, what has it made me? So I made myself a rule. And this happened because some of the people in my team were like, should we cover this? Should we not cover this? And every time I would have to say yes or no, I
Yeah.
was like, okay, let's make a blanket rule.
Yeah.
We're never going to write anything we can't say to somebody's face.
Mm.
That is a great rule. There might
Yeah.
be times where you'd be like, tell me, are you dating this person?
Mm.
But if you can't go and say something someone's face,
Yeah.
you're never going to go and say, oh, I know, do you do drugs? You're never going to go
Yeah.
say, I'm sleeping with
Yeah.
someone. It's
Yeah.
not kind, and it's their life. It's their choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is a rule people should apply for their own social media. When you comment on something,
Yeah.
when you react to someone, is would I say this in real
Yeah.
life?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
will find probably 85% of the time you wouldn't.
Yeah, that's so true, Malini ji, and I think you've brought up a really interesting, I would say, paradox of sorts here, because on one end we dehumanize celebrities so much, right? And on the other hand, in all cultures, but I think especially in our culture, there's another trend of we worship celebrities. There's the deification of celebrities. And I was curious from your vantage point, because you write about Bollywood, you've interacted very closely with Bollywood. Uh, what are your thoughts on this other flip side, the deification and the worship of celebrities?
I think it's because we just, there's so much excitement in our movies. Everything is
Mm.
so grand. And the reason why people love to find out what celebrities wear, where they go, who they date, what they do, is because it's allowing you to extend that dream just for a little longer. Just
Mm.
stretch it out a little more. And that's why we want to know all those things.
So I do a lot of my work in diversity and inclusion, and one of the things I'm very acutely aware of is how the experience of being a woman really shapes people's experiences as work. And you being a digital entrepreneur and a female digital entrepreneur at that, I'm wondering how you think the fact that you're female has affected your experiences.
It's really funny because people always sort of prod me to ask me about this glass ceiling and what was it so hard. And I have to say, for the entire duration of my career, it has been amazing to be a woman, because from little things, from when I started, I was this cool kid with this little camera saying, please, can I go in front? And everyone let me go in front. There's a girl, it's fine. It was less intimidating for celebrities that I'm a young girl who's asking them questions. They didn't find it as strange, or like, I'm sure if there was like a sweaty guy doing the same thing, they maybe have been uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But ironically enough, um, when I won like Impact's #1 most influential woman in media, marketing, and
Yeah.
advertising,
Yeah.
this is like probably in my 40s, I
Yeah.
went to speak in Goa at a conference.
Yeah.
And I was really excited. For half an hour, I was talking about brand building and entrepreneurship and everything. And at the end of it, there was a guy who's pretty high up in media, had to just do a couple Q&A with me.
Yeah.
And we sat down on stage, and he said, I've always wanted to ask you 2 questions.
Yeah.
And he said, the first question is, I've heard you're very expensive. So I let that slide, saying people say I charge lakhs for a tweet.
Yeah.
Fine. Then he said, I've always wanted to know one more thing. And I thought, okay, now he's going to ask me about brand building or
Yeah.
the new age, millennials, something. And he said, how have you resisted the urge to have an extramarital affair with a Bollywood actor? And I
Okay.
remember thinking, I was like, one, you have like diminished my entire life's work into this ridiculous question. And you think it's really funny. And you are someone who's supposed to be so educated. And thousands of people are in this audience laughing. And I remember thinking, like, what hope is there for the next generation of people who we call less evolved if the
Yeah.
head of media companies are asking these questions? And I
Yeah.
remember walking down the stairs, and I was most mad at myself that at that time I laughed it off. And I was like, oh, have you seen how hot my husband is or something?
Yeah.
And then as I walked off stage, I was so pissed. And I tweeted
Yeah.
saying, what a great conference. So sad it ended on such a sexist note. And suddenly the machinery went into play, and people were
Yeah.
messaging, and I got a message call saying, hey, can you delete the tweet? Because I was like, why should I delete the tweet? It's their bad. But they're like, oh, it's like this boys club. And I was thinking, that's just ridiculous that it's like that. And that's where I felt that pushback. And so I think those are the little things more than difficulty in entrepreneurship is this, the way that certain people unfortunately take advantage of their situation to make a joke or not
Yeah.
give you the right kind of space that you should get for
Yeah.
whatever you've achieved.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it is. I don't think I've dealt with it in my entrepreneurial journey. I
Yeah.
think I've seen it afterwards, but I'm glad because I'm much better equipped to deal with it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, according to you, needs to change on social media to make it a safer space for women?
Quite a few things. See, unfortunately, I think men and women don't play well together on the internet, at least
Yeah.
in India, for sure, yet.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that all men are like that. Absolutely not. I think, like you guys, great examples of positive masculinity. You understand, you would never send a girl a creepy DM, but there are so many who are doing it wrong. And I think that the biggest problem for women on social media is that just because of this noise and the junk, not even
Yeah.
talking about trolling, is that this overwhelming, ask any girl you know,
Yeah.
ask her what her DMs are like.
Mm.
They are filled with hi, hello, all of that, and dick pics.
Yeah.
That's it. And I don't think that's what your DMs are like, right?
Yeah.
And even if there is a creepy message or a naked girl's photo, it's probably from another guy pretending to be a girl.
Yeah.
Chances are high,
Yeah.
right? And so I really tried to dig deep into this. And I remember thinking that for the longest time, we have been all told, ignore it. And I did too. I ignored it, saying that they're just looking for attention. Don't give them attention. But I've been doing this for so long, I've realized it's getting worse. People are not even using fake accounts anymore. And more often, I've seen that they are teenage boys
Yeah.
who just don't know any better.
Yeah.
It's really our generation that has to fix this. Otherwise, your kids, my kids, are going to grow up in like the wasteland, zombie land version of the internet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I saw this really inspiring thing. My friend Tina Singh, who's an actress, who obviously has beautiful, sexy pictures on her Instagram, totally her choice. And she gets lots of creepy messages. And I was so amazed because she would call people out, right? This guy has done this or whatever. She took it to the next level.
Yeah.
Because they were not fake accounts. She would go to their Instagram,
Yeah.
find a relative, find out what school they're in, and
Hmm.
write to the parents or the school and say, this is what this,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and their parents would call up crying, I didn't know my son is doing this, I'm so sorry. And they would go from calling you like a slut to sorry Didi so fast.
Yeah.
And that means we're just missing gender sensitization.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we all come in, and that's where it can be really resolved if we all consciously make an effort to
Yeah.
fix this. And
Yeah.
I think that the other thing is there are so many guys like yourself, so many guys we know who do it right? And
Yeah.
that's what people should emulate. Like, we would not today allow someone to say something to a friend of ours who's a girl or a guy
Yeah.
and get away with it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
would not allow a guy to drop his pants on the middle of the
Obviously,
street.
yeah. Yeah.
But why do we let it happen online?
Yeah.
Because we don't think of the online world as another. But now even the pandemic has made it even more clear that life is
Yeah.
digital.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think that needs to change. And I think that we have to start saying something, which is why we started the Ignore No More online campaign,
Yeah.
where people don't know it's against the law. Outraging a woman's modesty, you can put, if you file an FIR, the same guy who sends you a creepy DM can go to jail for a year.
Yeah.
If we start doing that,
Hmm.
we'll clean up the internet pretty
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah, and I mean, as you're describing, I think one of the dynamics is that when you're talking to somebody on social media, like they feel so far away and they feel like that they're not really there. And I'm actually curious about something similar, Mani ji. There's that distance where you feel someone, if you're texting them on social media, it's not the same as saying it to their face, like you said earlier. And there's this thing of, there's the public persona on social media, and then there's who you really are, and the persona is really carefully, neatly managed, and everything's always great. And I guess it's true for all of us, but I guess my question would be in terms of people you work with in Bollywood and people you've spoken to what extent do you think there is a disparity between like the public persona and people as they really are? Because I think a lot of people also, like we discussed earlier, they look up to and want to emulate the lives of Bollywood stars. And if you could give some clarity as to how true to life or how disparate are these two in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, like, I'll try to give you a different perspective on it, right?
Yeah.
I think that it's important to be honest and say that I don't always look like this. I don't
Mm.
always feel happy. I do have days where I feel like shit. These things have hurt me too. It's
Yeah.
important to do that. That's there has to be enough honesty to that degree. But I think celebrities are put under so much scrutiny
Yeah.
that they don't really know which way to go. I think during the pandemic, everyone's been pretty honest about what they're doing. They're showing you what they live like at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
A lot of their social media is meant to just promote their movies as well. So I'm not sure what people want from other people on their social media that'll make them happy.
To add to this, like you said, there's a lot of pressure, and also the cancel culture that is erupting is so scary because everyone is afraid of voicing their opinion. You can't have an
Mhm.
opinion because some or the other person will get offended.
I think the sad thing is it's so much easier and so much more accepted to criticize than to praise. And I
Yeah.
realized this at Fashion Week because I was sitting in the front row. I was so excited. I finally was sitting front. And there was a lady from a newspaper sitting next to me. And she, before the show started, said, "Oh, I hope this designer doesn't do the same thing. She always does the same thing."
Hmm.
The show was very different, something that's designed her, not done before. As soon as the lights came on, she said, "Oh, she should stick to doing the same thing." And I couldn't resist. I told her, I was like, you can't say both things.
Yeah.
You let her do something new and you may not like it, but you can't then. And then she was very confused because the show was Malini Ramani's and my name is Malini. And she asked me what
Yeah.
my name is. And she was like, because it's so much easier to say you don't like something.
Yeah.
People will, and you will sometimes yourself find yourself agreeing, "Oh yeah, that was shit," even if you didn't think so.
Yeah.
Because we all try to please each other. We all try to fit in.
Yeah.
And I think the only solution to this is not bitching and moan about it, not complaining about it, not, like, forget cancel culture. What if I said the new currency of the internet is positivity? How
Yeah.
much are you worth?
Yeah.
How much positivity can you put out in a day online?
Yeah.
And the great thing is that there is no limit to how much positivity you can earn. It's not like likes, it's not like followers, it's not like cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
It's completely on you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
you can change people's experience. Like we all worry, and myself included. I used to be like, oh shit, this post didn't get enough likes. I
Yeah.
didn't get enough followers. And I
Yeah.
was like, enough. Now I'm going to look at other people's profiles who may have less than me. It's
Yeah.
the same thing, right? And
Yeah.
go and leave them a comment. Double
Hmm.
tap, witness them. You will make them feel amazing.
Yeah.
And there is something known as the helper's high. It is literally a dopamine effect, same as what you get when you get a like.
Yeah.
The only difference is this one is in your control.
Yeah.
You can be on a helper's high 24/7,
Yeah.
you know, your entire life, as opposed to waiting for someone else to give you that.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel great all the time. I'm constantly on this helper's high, and it's not necessarily just for other people. I feel great because I'm doing something that makes me feel good. And I feel that that's so much more valuable than watching a number count. Like you said, we've dehumanized celebrities.
Yeah.
We've dehumanized each other.
Yeah.
You look at your Instagram, say, oh, I got 35 likes. That's so bad.
Yeah.
What about these 35 people that you've just canceled?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if you had been in a room and were sharing a story and 35 people were listening to you, you would be thrilled.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true, and it's so simple, Malini ji. But like, if I boot up my Facebook with the intention of, okay, who can I impress or who can I win over today is one thing. But if you're like, okay, on whose face can I put a smile today? Whose day can I brighten up today? You'll engage more and you leave feeling more fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
And you know, the funny thing is, if you decided that, okay, from now on, everyone who posts on my Instagram, I'm going to go and say thank you.
Mm.
You would be exhausted if you had 1,000 likes. You'd almost wish it was only 30, you know?
Yeah.
So you have to learn to give back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's always more energizing to give than to.
It is. There
About-
is
yeah,
no,
yeah.
and this is not some like frivolous thing we're saying. It's not, I'm not making it up. There is no one I've met,
Hmm.
and I'm sure that you've met, that can say they did not feel good by making someone feel good. I have never heard anyone say that felt like shit.
Yeah. That's so true.
True.
That's so true.
We had a question from the business side of things. The brand Miss Malini is something that highly relies on your persona.
Yeah.
But do you ever worry about how the brand in the long term will outlive you and become an entity of its own?
Absolutely. Great question. And this is a question that investors ask all the time. And I always wanted to create a legacy brand, which is why the anime, Miss Malini. And that's why my identities on social are Malini Agarwal, because I do want to go on and do my Oprah-esque things and let the brand live. I don't blog anymore.
Yeah.
I'm in a lot of the content, but it's pretty much runs as a machine.
Yeah.
But it's true. There is this concept of key man insurance or key woman insurance in this case, that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what happens to the brand? But it's, you could say the same thing for Apple. If Steve Jobs got hit by, like, it's the same thing, right? It's
Yeah.
just that because my name is in it, people find it harder to disconnect. If I had called my brand like Vogue and
Yeah.
I ran it would not be as hard. And it has been a struggle. I completely can relate to that.
Yeah.
But we are slowly learning how to distinguish those two brands, and which is why something like Girl Tribe, which started off as Malini's Girl Tribe, is now Girl Tribe by Miss Malini. So it's a subtle shift, but
Yeah.
these things make a difference for sure.
Yeah.
And it is tough. This has been a big learning. But ironically, on the other side, Miss Malini would not have become the brand it is without a persona behind it, because it was the first of its kind influencer. So it's kind of, again, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's a fine line.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into that point you made earlier about people felt like Miss Malini was speaking to them. It's that one-on-one conversation. It's not like this faceless, nameless entity that's talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's again, it's your digital best friend, you know, and
Yeah.
a lot of times what happened is, I've seen it, you know, you see your glossy magazines, they can be very intimidating for
Yeah.
your average Indian girl who might be sitting in a small town. She does not know what monochrome on the, you know, Paris runway means.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you have someone who can decode that and say, okay, get black shorts and a white t-shirt and wear it with this sling bag from Mintra,
Yeah.
boom. And
Yeah.
that's actually a translation of that runway in a non-intimidating, aspirational way.
Yeah.
And that's what we tried to create.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
So
also,
not condescending, but aspirational.
But aspirational. Yeah.
we also noticed that you started Miss Malini trending, and I think that's you being ahead of the curve again, where you report about influencers and bloggers, and that's something that other media houses don't do much. I want to know your thought behind this. Do you think influencers and digital stars will be at par with Bollywood stars in the future?
So I love this story because me and Karishma, who's Soul Curry, who runs the trending desk, had
Yeah.
a 3 a.m. random chat.
Yeah.
And we're like, you know what? And it just came up, in WhatsApp conversation that we should do this. And
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. And we are proud that we're ahead of the curve in this, that we have always covered Bollywood and celebrated it. But
Yeah.
we know how hard influencers work and they don't get that kind of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So one, I wanted to give back because I've been in this industry so long and say, I see you and I see how hard you work. And I wanted to
Mm.
create a sense of community between the influencers. So they also
Mhm.
have this togetherness. And we launched it and we had this incredible trending launch party before the lockdown and it was a blast. And they felt so happy. They felt so validated. They felt so good. And I love that on my blog, I can put them next to Shah Rukh Khan and I can put an influencer and they 100% deserve it. They do their own makeup, lighting, production, direction, editing, everything, which
Yeah.
is probably not the case for most celebrities.
Hmm.
Both have their own place. But I think that they definitely are on par. And look at what the audience is doing. The audience is loving them. And if you look at the age bracket now,
Yeah.
Shah Rukh Khan is now the Dilip Kumar for the new generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I never thought of it that way.
It is. They
Yeah.
don't. They may love them, but they know your younger audience, younger stars. They would
Yeah.
much rather see Mr. Faizu in a Bollywood movie, probably,
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
maybe a Shah Rukh Khan. It's true.
Yeah.
And you have to just look at that perspective.
That's such a great insight. And as a fellow content creator, fellow influencer, it was so heartwarming to see Bollywood celebrities interviewing influencers. I saw Kareena Kapoor interviewing you, Varun
Mhm.
Dhawan interviewing Bhuvan Bam. So that's such a refreshing change that we are getting to see. And I think,
Yeah.
the influencer space is only going to grow and grow.
It'll grow, and I think that acknowledgement has come. There used to be a time where people are like, "Oh, TikTokers, why?" Like they're working so hard. You can scoff at anything. By the way, it takes a lot of effort to lip sync or time stuff. People think it's
That's true.
easy. It is not easy. It takes me like 15 takes to make one reel. It does.
Yeah.
It's not. You have to set up your lighting, do everything yourself. It's
Yeah.
very easy to, scoff at someone else's skill. I don't think you should be allowed to diss anybody's work
Mm.
unless you yourself can personally do it better. Which is why
Mm.
I say when we covered content, I would never review a show saying this show or this movie was bad.
Mm.
I say this, I didn't like this part.
Yeah.
I loved this part.
Yeah.
It's my opinion. It is not
Yeah.
the opinion of the world.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not someone who's like grown up in as a with the background to be able to judge
Yeah.
fashion or cinema. This is just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And it's much better to say, I wish this had been done. I don't know if you know this, but there is an actual a fact of it that whenever you use a negative word,
Yeah.
people associate that word with you.
Yeah.
Always. So if you can choose to say a sentence saying that was terrible or say that could have been better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it'll change how people, what energy they take away from you. People always ask me who was my favorite interview. So many, but I remember I spoke to Sushmita Sen once, and
Yeah.
I was talking to her about adoption because she adopted her daughters way
Yeah.
before anyone
Yeah.
even thought, and as a single woman.
Yeah.
And I was telling her, I was like, I was thinking about adopting, but it's so sad that when you go to doctors or people, they say, "Oh, tumhara khoon nahi hai, it's not your blood." And she said something amazing. She said, when people say that, you should tell them to think about it this way, that when you fall in love with someone,
Yeah.
you choose to marry them, the
Mm.
entire world comes together to celebrate your union. They're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So then,
That's true.
why can't we apply the same thing to children who are even more malleable, who
Yeah.
are even fresher in thought?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like it's
That's-
so obvious,
Yeah.
but nobody has ever said
Yeah.
that to me. And that will stay with me forever.
Yeah.
And I've never quite heard it put that way.
Yeah.
That way.
Yeah, and I think it ties beautifully into the piece we spoke about Miss Malini trending earlier, because it's about creating that community and creating that sense of family and creating that glue between people, so people feel like they're part of something larger, whether it's a family or whether it's a community of creators. Or I think that's such a beautiful and positive note to end it on, Malini ji. It's been such a fantastic conversation with you. Thank you so much for being on. We had a great time chatting with you, honestly, and we wish you all the luck with all your future endeavors. Any parting words that you have?
Well, one, you guys, thank you for doing your research and coming with such great questions. It's always such a delight. Really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure we'll continue this on social media and offline. I think parting words are just remember that the greatest currency of the internet can be positivity. So let's make it that.
Absolutely. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Malini ji. To our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Do let us know in the comment section below what your biggest insight was from this video. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like. If you enjoy watching such podcasts, don't forget to hit subscribe. And we will see you again in another interesting conversation. Take care. Bye.